masters. So knight f3 was played, d5, then an English opening, and we get a kind of reverse Benoni, where white's kind of being forced into a Benoni type structure here. Knight f6, after castles we have knight d7, and black is playing like white would in Benoni, trying to get a knight here to potentially play e4 later, and maybe even e3. It would be quite painful for white strategically. So knight a3 is played here. Okay, bishop e7. Knight goes to c2. So white might be prepared for later, you know, playing like this sort of plan for b5, and try and put pressure on e5 if this knight can be dislodged. If you have any questions, please let me know on the Play Chess server. Okay, so a5 is played, clamping down on white's potential for a3 and b4. So this a5 common bind, so rook b1, going for that plan anyway, potentially, but slowly. So castles, and now b3, which might mean that a3 and slowly prepare b4. Knight c5. After a3, bishop f5 was played, and with this it looks as though e4 is an important strategic break for black. White tries to keep control over the e4 square now. Bishop takes knight, right, it's bishop takes knight. Can't see bishop takes knight at the moment. Knight d2 just keeps a lock and key over that e4 break. So queen c8. Now, okay, so white doesn't mind even doubling pawns potentially with knight e4, allowing black to take on e4, because maybe he's thinking this d3 could be a good blockade point to reroute a knight later to d3. So knight takes e4, d takes e4, sorry, not d takes e4, bishop takes e4, and black does trade bishops. So if white can get that blockade, is it going to be that bad? But Nigel carries on blasting through now on the king's side. He plays f5, very aggressive, and he's got rid of the key defensive piece. So in theory, you know, this might be dangerous, even f4, but in practice, is it? At the moment, Nigel's not in any hurry to play f4. So he actually plays queen e6, keeping that tension going. And now white actually takes on f5, and rook takes f5, and another blockade now on e4, which might mean space on d3 for a knight blockade. But now the pressure's intensifying on f2. Knight e1, okay, it's heading for that key square, which would protect f2. But now comes a4, and one of the points about the queen on e6 is revealed that c4 is a bit of a target. But you might think, well, what about taking on rook b7? Isn't that dangerous? But in fact, another option is found by white here, just to try and get the queens off by force. Queen d5. One of the symptoms of this queen d5 seems to be a weak pawn. Easy to say that a weak pawn is going to be on d5, which could be collectible by black. So this is what Nigel heads for. He just takes, establishing that pawn is quite weak for white potentially. Knight a5, and all black needs to do in this position, it seems, is e4, and he'll be laterally attacking that pawn on d5. Okay, and also the knight is cunningly protecting b7 now against b takes. But b takes is played anyway. b6, in no rush to collect this pawn with e4 at the moment. However, it's white's turn. He plays knight d3. And now knight c4 is actually played. Okay, so is this knight first heading for the blockade square knight d6? White energetically plays a5, Nigel just takes, and now a4, which might be useful in fixing that pawn, but at the moment black's pieces seem quite strong, eyeing key squares, and this knight's kind of dominant on c4, difficult to chase away. So bishop d6 is played, actually not using that square for a knight blockade, but instead the bishop. So on the cards now is e4 and rook takes d5. Rook b5, maybe trying to head off that plan. And Nigel doesn't seem in any particular hurry to try and put pressure on d5 here. He just plays h6, which means no back row issues to worry about later for his king. Knight b2, and this knight exchange is now avoided and evicting the rook on b5 at the same time with this next move, knight a3. So offering actually a5 dynamically, and that's taken. And now e4, so there is now pressure on d5. Also on the cards now is e3, because if takes, then there's rook takes f1. Having a pawn on e3 looks kind of menacing. Okay, white decides here to try and blunt black's pressure maybe with this next move, offering basically a pawn sack, bishop f4, offering to sack a pawn, maybe to loosen, you know, c7 a bit to remove that defender. But Nigel now takes the b file with rook b8. So okay, this knight looks quite curious on a3, but it is stopping rook b5s. So black has control over quite a few squares here. Bishop takes d6, c takes. Now knight d1. And now the knight goes back to c4, encouraging basically rook b5. And also this knight's kind of menacing and supporting a few other ideas, but for the moment white plays rook b5. And now finally this d5 is going to drop like a right apple. So Nigel takes on b5, then takes on d5. And okay, we've got these central passed pawns with d3 and d2 on the cards clearly. Also b5 is about to drop as well, and this kind of maneuver will be kind of painful for white. King g2, and in fact the b pawn is collected now, so black is winning for the first time in the game on material, and it looks like a dominant position. Just rook and knight, they're a lot more aggressive than white's rook and knight. White struggles on though, f3, and it's really shut down. White's position is shut down with e3. So horrendous really, this wedge and this control of this file. These pieces are just so passive. The end is 9 here. f4. Now knight d2. So how is the execution going to come? Attacks the rook. The rook moves, and now the simple move king f7, signifying perhaps the black king is going to venture somewhere quite dangerously at leisure, or maybe even support g5. But here white decided his position is hopeless. He can't move his knight anywhere, and all of these squares are cut off. His knight and rook are essentially prisoners here, and he just had enough. Black will probably improve the position quite easily. For example, one way might be to just get the king here and play rook b1. That would be pretty devastating if white can only watch that. Okay, so we'll do a quick review of this game. It was a bit of a sort of reverse Benoni strategy, as though white had played the Benoni defense and black is playing classically against it. So he got this dangerous pressure on the queen side and the f file, and then there was this kind of dislocated pawn which eventually fell, with black having the advantage after this, after the smoke cleared. Black seems to end up with very, very active pieces, and white's destroyed after e3. A terrible bind position. So hopeless pieces for white here, just waiting for the end. Okay, let's have a look at another game of Nigel Short's. So just quickly load up another game. So Mark Hebden, yeah, horrendous clampdown at the end. Mark Hebden playing white against Nigel Short. Plays d4, and let's flip the board actually. So Nigel Short as black cunningly plays e6, which invites a French defence. So this is a very interesting move against d4, not the standard knight f6 or d5, just inviting a French defence. Mark Hebden's not interested at the moment in the French defence, he just plays knight f3. Now we have this central strike, and we get a transposition actually into the Sicilian defence now after e4. So we've transposed into a Sicilian defence. And interestingly here, there's a very quick attack on d4 now with queen b6. Curious stuff, quite unusual. So what is the purpose of this? This is often a very useful move, though, seen in quite a few Grandmaster games, just to try and pacify the white on b3, and it works here. And then the queen sneakily just goes back now. So it's trying to improve on the normal Sicilian. Queen's usefully placed there, the knight's a bit passive there. f4, another standard plan by black, a6. So he can go b5 maybe later and bishop b7 to start exerting pressure on e4. Bishop e2, and now d6. So we have this Scheveningen kind of centre. With the potential later of d5 or e5 being useful at some point. Castles, knight f6, white plays bishop f3. So white's play looks kind of sort of classically orientated against d5, but black seems to have an active position, seems to have found a nice variation of the Sicilian by some sort of strange transposition. So king h1, bishop e7. So Scheveningen type position, knight c3, castles, queen e1, as though there's hacking plans afoot to put pressure on the king's side. But b5 hasn't been prevented, and it's used here, b5. Now interesting, in the immediate central break with e5, and black takes, white takes, opening up some pressure potentially on the f-file, but for the moment e5 is a bit loose here. Knight d7, okay, bishop f4, bishop b7. So what's going on here? Black potentially is going to use the c and maybe d files, and maybe b4 will dislodge this knight on c3. So the central battle has just begun. e5 is a focal point as well. For the moment, white strengthens his control of e5 by playing queen g3. Okay. I just want to pause here to see if I can incorporate chat from anyone following on stream as well. One moment, please. Okay. Okay, so where were we? B4. So knight D1. So black central control. Is it really dangerous here? A5. Just carrying on playing on the queen side is going to give maybe some extra trump cards to black. Maybe even the A5 square could be useful as a basis for attacking E5 here in the future. For the moment, the knight stumbles now back to the centre, knight E3. And now carrying on the queen side, it seems black has been given a free hand on the queen side. These pawns are not usually so aggressive. So who thinks black stands better here? If I give you 20 seconds to have a look at this position. So who do you think stands better, white or black? Anyone have opinions about this position? Has black's queenside initiative been carried away quite strongly, do you think? Yeah, black. Yeah, I think so. Okay, so here some kind of prophylaxis move is played. Okay, so King H8 is now played. So we have here some positional manoeuvring to try and outplay Mark Hebden, who's, you know, a 25-16 GM as well as Nigel Short. But Nigel Short's 2677 at the moment, going into the 2700 club. But how does he start to outplay white? Knight D4 looks like a logical move to highlight that D6 square. Okay, but now comes knight D4, inviting an exchange of bishops, right? And white takes that bishop, queen takes B7, and now bishop G5. So is there pressure exerted? Well, these points, is it going to be significant? Is something brewing here or not? F6 seems to interrupt any attacking plans white might have. Bishop H4. And now knight C5. Putting more pressure on E4. And are these knights about to do something extremely evil, these two knights? These evil twins. So E takes F, G takes, and we've got a G file emerged. So actually we've got potential coordination on the poor G2 square coming up. So Rook AD1 was played. Rook AD8, protecting the knight. C3, trying to kick that horrendous knight on D4. Nigel takes, and of course he's fragmented the pawns. He's got access potentially once the knight's not there on B2, if that's useful. Okay, but the knight must move it, or does it? Does this knight have to move? It doesn't actually. The queen is just attacked first, queen F4, and now the queen's attacked again, knight E2. So what are these knights doing? Harassing the poor queen. Queen G4, and again the queen's kicked. A number of forcing moves. And you might think, well, what about, isn't this knight on? Okay, what's happened here is that also there's an attack on H4. So if queen takes knight, there's bishop takes H4. So Mark is being kicked around here. So what does Mark do? He keeps hold of his bishop on H4. He plays queen H5. Another forcing move, rook takes D1. Rook takes D1. Black now takes another forcing move. And now we have a really evil deflection type move. The white queen is trying to defend F2 here, because look at these knights coordinating potentially. So this next move is an evil deflection. I wonder if you can guess it. If I give you 10 seconds, What did black play here? If you're on chess plays, please avoid looking at the score sheet. So black to play here. What move does black play? So you want to try and stop white protecting f2. So what is a good move here for black? Or maybe I'll give you 20 seconds to be generous. So think about this position. What would you play here with black? 20 seconds starting from now. Aha. I think one of you may have guessed the move on Play Chess, Tristessa. Anyone else? Yes, there's a very good deflection type move. Deflection, I think, is when you want to lure a piece away from its defensive responsibilities, unlike a decoy, which is more like a drag and drop, where you want a piece on a specific location. This is deflection because the key square to defend is f2. The next move tries to deflect the white queen from defending f2. So we have queen e7, quite evil move from Nigel Short. He's been kicking Mark around in the last 3 moves. And you see that if queen takes e7, then we would have knight f2 and it would be mate, quite cruel. So the queen's forced to move again. It moves backwards to keep hold of the f2 square for dear life. But now the c3 pawn is dropping. Knight takes c3. And the rook's attack, the rook moves. It's horrendous, forcing moves all the time. Queen g7 not only defends the c3 knight from afar, but also puts pressure on g2. So black has a very dominating position here of pawn up. It's pretty nasty for white. But white carries on with knight d6. And now rook g8, putting more pressure on g2. The knight at the moment is holding g2, but queen f1 is played anyway. h6 to avoid any back row tricks or checks, maybe giving the king an escape square. Well, back row tricks are difficult to imagine here. Knight ec4. Okay, but you can see that knight e5 might be useful tactically because the queen takes knight f7 check. That could be coming in. Rook b8 though introduces the idea of rook b1, which is pretty nasty. Here white takes on e4. Okay. I think on rook b1 there might be a check. Rook b1 wasn't played here. In fact, just knight takes e4 was played here. Okay, leaving black controlling that b fold. The knight's dominant. He's a pawn up. I'll just shut the door for a sec if that carries on. Hold on. Okay, so where were we? So here, okay, white's got a horrible position, but he carries on, he battles on, he plays g3, which of course does weaken the diagonal. So why did white play g3 here? I think there's a question of knight f2 check and rook b1 check is another deflection because the queen is trying to defend now b1. Okay, so the queen has to defend b1. Yeah, I'll give you a token move. If a3, knight f2 check, and you'll see rook b1 is devastating. So I think this is the reason for this weakness of the last move, and I can totally identify with a move like this. I played a fatal move in a difficult position last night, as it goes, and it's very easy to crack under pressure. And play a move offering just an easier win to the opponent. But here it's very difficult to suggest things for white. He can't move this pawn, of course, because then knight g3 would win the exchange. You know, that would be just winning the exchange because of that fork. So it's horrible. Things have gone badly wrong from earlier. So g3 just is gagging for this queen b7, just putting the queen on that sensitive diagonal, threatening horrible stuff. King g1, now check. King G2, and now actually I think there's an idea that white has Queen A1 check, checking this, because I can't explain this next move in any other way. Why would black in this position want to play King G8? He might want to play Rook B2 but not allow Queen A1, which would be pinning against his king. So King G8 I think has the idea now of being able to use the rook once this knight moves, or even Rook B1. But this Queen A1 is deprived from being a check. H4, and now Rook C8. Okay, Knight E3, and now Queen B8 eyes G3. Knight D1 protecting G3 with the rook. Check. King H3, Rook takes A2, creating a dangerous pass pawn. Okay. Rook D7 is a bit of a blunder. This definitely is a weakness of the last move, because the rook was defending G3. So I wonder if you could spot the next move that black plays here. There is a slight weakness of the last move here, yes. You might be able to guess it if I give you 5 seconds, even, or 10 seconds. Okay, I think I gave you a clue earlier, so I'm going to spoil it very soon. Maybe he was in severe time pressure or something. It's checkmate there. It was actually mate. It seems to be mate. This is the game score according to Chess Games Gone, mate. I assume the Grandmaster was mated. Yes, 2500 Grandmaster. But how on earth did white get so outplayed in this Sicilian defence? We have to go back and try and unravel this game. So it's a bit of a mystery. Okay, how did we get a favourable Sicilian defence? Is the first question. How was this done? There was this cheeky Queen B6. It drove the knight back to a passive location. Now this is F4. I'm not sure. I'm not 100% sure about this F4 here, in combination with Knight B3. Doesn't white have to lock down the queenside operations? That's one question. The queenside operations were left to run a bit wild here. But first the Scheveningen type pawn structure was constructed. And it was only D5 that black was prevented from doing. But the queenside operations carried on pretty soon. So B5. Now with this free hand on the queen side, these knights are going to be driven away and maybe some central control is lost. White breaking up the centre with E5. Although it sort of extends some sort of pieces, you know, like these two. But is it enough? The centre is more open now. There's 3 open central squares now, and there's only this pawn which is put under great pressure. And white's pieces are slightly passive, but you could argue it's an overprotection of E5. Plus you could argue white has access to the E4 square, a good pivot point for pieces to try and get over to that king side, maybe swap this defender and try and get the knights in. But in the meantime, black is constructing a high pressure situation here and is going to remove this defender on the diagonal and try and plough down to G2. And within that process it seems that F6 will play a key part to try and use the G file to try and put pressure on G2 later. Chess Explained has got something to say about this. Nigel's move order with C5 was very clever versus Hebden, as this move order irritates his usual lines. Okay. So we have some sort of white being outplayed somehow, but white is trying to maintain this iron grip protection of the E5 square and make use of that E4 square. It looks all pretty logical at the moment for both sides, but black does seem to have this dangerous free hand which he uses now. He dislodges the knight on C3. The knight, instead of going to E4, went actually to D1, which is a slower approach to get to the king side, perhaps you could argue, or is it going to F2? It actually ends up going to E3 later. So one question here was about knight E4, if that was possible or desirable. I'm not really sure 100% why that would have been out of the question. Maybe it's this E5 is hanging. That's probably why. Something to do with E5. So knight D1 was chosen instead, and now instead of going for E5, well, there's bishop takes B7, queen takes, and then, but you know, that simply E5 would drop after bishop takes B7. So that's probably why knight C1 was chosen. Knight D1. So now A5. So he can't take on E5 just yet. Knight E3 and now A4. So black is playing on the queen side, dislodging that other knight. So King H8 is preparation to try and gain focus on the G file. Knight D4. The knights seem to be doing something constructive, but so does black now. He's making more pressure on G2, and these knights are coming in, flooding into the center, it seems, in this continuation. And now the G file is also starting to work for black after this F6. So bishop H4, knight C5. E takes, G takes. Okay, so we've got this G file which is going to attack the white queen with tempo. Okay, so this is starting to look bad for the G2 pressure. Rook AD1. So we saw Rook AD8 supporting the knight. We've also got this strategic break on the cards. Okay, so C3, trying to dislodge that strong knight. But now we have a series of forcing moves which seems to emphasize black's pressure. So first of all, this move attacking the queen, another move attacking the queen, and the knights are dangerously placed here on E2 and C3, and at least they're going to win C3 if nothing else. But there's worse for white in store. He keeps moving his queen to unfortunate places. So queen G4 allows F5 now. So even though E2's on, he doesn't want to lose that bishop particularly. So he invites this series of exchanges. But now this horrible deflection move, queen E7. So if queen takes E7, we have knight F2, and that would have been mate. So the queen can't take on E7. It goes back humbly, trying to keep protection of F2. And now Nigel simply just uses his position to just snatch that pawn. He safeguards his king soon, it should be noted. First with H6, but then he also this diagonal potentially is dangerous in some lines for the king. So he takes time out very soon now after this weakening move on this diagonal. Well, first he positions his queen on that diagonal, but now we have check, and this cures king G8, so probably against queen A1 I expect. H4, which does weaken G3, and that's immediately targeted because that was the weakness of the last move there. Well, not immediately. The knight's kicked first, and now queen B8, it's hitting G3. Knight D1 protecting G3, but now black's pieces are really strong, and I think white must have been in time pressure. He just lets himself be mated. Maybe he just fed up with his position. Okay, so let's go over another Nigel short game. Okay. So this is against a 26-8 Nd3 Rescu. Okay, so as white, E4, let's flip the board. So we have the Sicilian, open Sicilian. So Nigel is white, he plays knight C3 here. And now the English attack system was very popular with a lot of English grandmasters. But actually, he plays queen F3, which is quite unusual. I don't know if Chess Explained, do you have anything to say about that on Twitch? Broadcasting via Twitch TV today, so the usual live stream con, by the way. So this is unusual, I think. Queen F3. Well, it's not as common as other stuff, I think. Switching the queen quite quickly, maybe to the king side. So I maybe G7 soon. So knight BD7, which seems to be, you know, trying to use the fact the queen's on F3 for a tempo game. H3. So does black want to use E5 for the moment for the tempo game? No. Queen B6. It looks odd, and this looks really strange. I don't think I've ever seen this before in a Sicilian game. The queen going to F3 and now going to E3. So he's blocking in his own bishop. Maybe he's trying to disprove this queen B6. It looks quite unusual. It does provoke a reaction from black to weaken the D5 square, quite committedly weaken D5 though, with this next move, E5. So is this a provisionally made up move? It must be out of black's preparation, surely. He's weakening D5 here. Knight B3. So now Nigel has the passive looking knights, but black's B5 is a long way coming with the queen there, and this queen invitation to exchange queens is avoided by black. Queen C7. Okay. Is the bishop on D2 a good square though? What is going to be done to try and castle queenside here? A4 indicates that white is not going to try and castle queenside really. He's just concerned about B5. So D5 and B5 here are more classically put under lock and key. Okay. B6. And now G4, which seems to be very nice, because if this knight can be chased, then D5, maybe even bishop G2, putting more pressure indirectly on D5. H6, bishop G2. It seems white has emerged with a very fine position, with counterplay stopped. And in fact with this H6 it means F5 might be more vulnerable in the future for such a manoeuvre, making G6 more difficult maybe. As a longer term plan, this H6 might also be a problem for G5. Okay, bishop B7, and now just castles. And maybe black is paranoid about G5, and this may show the threat is stronger than the execution, but besides that he's resourcefully going to use his rook on H8, which is something I know about from last night as well, trying to use the rook on H8. So this next move also maybe is wary about white playing F4, which could be dangerous for black as well as G5. So this next move by black looks a bit unusual, but it seems G5 does severely commit a weakness, you know, which looks gagging for a knight maneuver in the future, this F5 square. Queen E2, although an unusual retreat, does mean the bishop can now come perhaps usefully to E3 soon. And in fact the very next move it does come to E3. So what is white's plan now? Let's see. Bishop E7, rook FC1 has the implication that maybe C pawn is ready to go. After knight D5, maybe C4 is on the cards. King F8. In fact, the knight doesn't commit to going to D5. It goes, well, at the moment, Nigel plays knight D2. Improving his knight, maybe like this, is on the cards. Knight C5. And now extending the scope of the bishop just by one square now, a little trick, knight D5. Getting access to E4 as well. So sealing the hole on D5, but getting usefully this E4 square. Knight takes D5, E takes D5. Is this the start or the end of black's more severe problems? Black locks down the queen side with A5. And now Nigel voluntarily, he looks at maybe black's pawns, and a lot of them are on dark squares, a bit like drafts, isn't it? Yes, Chess Explained says, I think Rescu is a good player, but G5 is just asterisks. So what are asterisks? Well, if you look at this position, it's a bit like draft. So this bishop potentially is going to be a bad bishop, which means would you rather get rid of this bishop for that knight? Because the knight's got access to both colour squares. So maybe this is a very good trade strategically, this next move. I wonder how many of you would play it actually. You have a lot of pawns on dark squares here. So would you play this next move? Bishop takes c5 voluntarily. How many of you would really give that big consideration here? If I let you see this position for 20 seconds, is this a good strategic decision? Bishop takes c5. Would you agree with it? Just yes or no will do. If I give you a few seconds to sort of say yes or no. Bishop takes c5, voluntarily giving up the dark square bishop. What do you think? Statistically, you've got a lot of pawns on dark squares. This bishop's a bit shut down, isn't it, by this pawn on d5. You've got access to e4, which means also you can reroute the knight like this, or like this, or like that, or you can use c4 maybe in the future. Yeah. Okay, let's see what happens. Queen takes c5, and now c4, and this rook's also activated. And basically we've got a wall put against this bishop on b7 as well. Rook e8, and now knight e4 gaining tempo. Beautiful knight on e4. Queen c7. And now this next move implies a break with b4 is going to happen. So b4 maybe taking. Now black goes on to the attack. He's not really in a position to attack white. So this is a bit jokey, this next move, h5, as though the rook is going to be dangerous for the king. White's king safety is very solid here, I'd say. You just visually, the resources are not there. White dominates this position, and this b4 breakthrough is painful to watch. So knight g3, just in case white wants even h5 maybe for the knight, or f5. And actually black doesn't play hg, but keeps the position closed now with h4. So we have knight f5, a dominating knight, bishop d8, and now bishop e4. So this is a horrible strategic crush sort of position, isn't it? Bishop c8, maybe wanting, you know, opposite coloured bishops. That would be an ideal maybe for black, but Nigel doesn't want opposite coloured bishops. Knight e3. The rook comes out with rook h6, and now b4, which has been long on the cards, is played. Black takes, white takes. Pressure can be mounted now frontally on b6. Rook f6. Where is this rook heading? Maybe to f4? Is it going to be a nuisance? Bishop f5, wanting to exchange off the light square bishops to leave this powerful knight against the bishop. Bishop a6. Rook cb1, starting to put real pressure on b6. Queen c5. And now queen b2, as though an exchange sack might be on the cards. Rook takes might be on the cards, because then, you know, maybe these pawns are going to be liberated. King e7. No, an exchange sack is not played here, just queen c2. White's waiting for a little bit, seeing what black's doing. Bishop c7. And now another knight maneuver, evil knight maneuver. Knight f1. It looks as though the knight's rerouting like this now that the queen and rook are protecting c4. Rook h6, knight d2, rook g8, knight e4, so rerouting again. Queen c1, putting pressure on g5 now. There's a concrete threat now, which needs to be parried. White achieves an ideal position over here. This bishop's still kind of locked in. The queen's not really doing anything. Black commits now to another pawn on the dark squares. Oh dear. This is a strategically painful position. Bishop e6. It looks pretty, but where is the breakthrough, you might ask? So rook f8. And what's that expression? It's difficult sometimes to win a one position. Queen c2. Now, what is the queen doing on c2? It looks as though there's a road which could be used in the future. Rook a8. King g2. It seems to be waiting for black to create another mistake or another weakness. And in fact, this next move, in a difficult position, reveals it's difficult not to avoid a weakness of the last move when you're in a difficult position. Black's next move, I don't know if I can encourage you all to become more resilient in very bad positions, or if it's worth it if you're just prolonging torture. I don't know, actually. But this next move certainly doesn't seem to prolong torture if it offers white a clear tactical solution now. The question is, could black maybe play his bishop backwards and forwards, or do something with the rook? His next move offers a weakness of the last move, it seems, from the evidence. King f8. Can you guess what white plays here? So this looks like a weakness of the last move. Why, you might ask? What was the king protecting? It's where the king is. It's a bit more exposed on f8 potentially. So if I give you 20 seconds here, can you guess what white played here? Starting from now. So it's good to have a beautiful position and strategically crush the opponent, but you also need tactics as well. Now, some of you are suggesting what seems to be a very, very dangerous move, but it wasn't the one played. Some of you are suggesting here knight takes f6. Possibly knight takes f6 wins, but actually the move played, I haven't done a detailed engine analysis of the position. The move played is knight takes g5. So let's assume black wants to recapture. I think there'll be check coming in now. So that's the weak, king's kind of exposed. Now if here, what sort of nasty thing happens here? Maybe check, maybe just taking here is enough, or there could be something even worse. Maybe check here to win another pawn. This would be kind of mating, wouldn't it? So let's assume the king doesn't want to go to g7. So if he moves to e8, it seems check and then mate is pretty clear. So unfortunately, it's easy when you're in a difficult position, and I hope you all realise that it's very easy to create a weakness of the last move. And here the 26-28, higher rated than most of us will ever be, did play king f8. Did he want a quick exit from this position? I'm not sure. It's just easy in a difficult position to create such a weakness of the last move. I don't know how many of you admit to cracking here as well. It's a miserable position strategically. The knight dominates everything. It's attacking everywhere. There's potentials for all sorts of nasties. It's just the queen has access to the light squares theoretically, and that's used in practice here. So how did black get completely murdered in this game? We've skimmed through this game, but shall we have a look again to see if we can get some insight? Okay. Sorry, there's a question here on Twitch. If black didn't play king f8, was there knight takes f6 anyway? Let's have a quick look at that. So say black played bishop d8. Was there knight takes f6 anyway? Actually, you're probably right, because if takes, it looks as though check is mating anyway. Whoops. This looks very, very dangerous. Is it a kill here? Does anyone see the killing move here? Yeah? Where's the kill? Someone say the combination. Just to explain, I think it's fair to say King F8 helped, but was there a concrete win here? So King F8 helped, didn't it? Black to lose quickly. So Bishop D8. Yeah, I'm not sure. It needs some really you know analysis. But okay, let's go back. Sorry, someone's saying Bishop D7 now. Rahman, you're saying Bishop D7. If Bishop D7 here, King F8, is there a win here? And someone engine check this. Is there a win in this position? Ah, check. What about Bishop E8? No, there's King E7. Hang on. Wait a second. Queen E8? Queen H7? Okay, engine check it, I think. But let's have a look how black was outplayed. Probably it helped King F8, yeah, for black to lose quickly. Let's just quickly go over this. How can we try and get something from white's play? So it was a really unusual Sicilian defense where black was provoked into major strategic weaknesses by this very strange looking Queen F3. Strange Queen F3, as though the white queen is offering itself as target practice, you know, for like things like knight E5, and then even strangely it goes back to E3 here, blocking in his own bishop and provoking a seemingly strategically awful E5. So we have potential, you know, gaping holes being created. And now white's plan is to sort of make sure B5 and D5 are clamped down on. And also this G4 looks very nice with this idea of getting more pressure on D5. So H6 seems to be black's plan to put all his pawns on dark squares soon. So he wants to put all these pawns... I'm joking. That seems to be black's plan in this game. He wanted to play drafts. Maybe he's a former drafts champion. He's putting all his pawns on dark squares here. After G5. It's just asking to be slowly crushed, isn't it, positionally? This position. Okay, so... yeah, so where is black's counterplay? There's not much counterplay, so Nigel proceeds to sort of exchange off strategically that knight for the bishop, and he proceeds to lock in this bishop. And now this knight is on a tour. It starts off on E4 and ends up on E4 soon as well. But first we have this interlude of provoking H4, putting more pawns committally on dark squares without any risk of the H file ever being opened. And now the knight heads back eventually to E4, but first some B file pressure on B6, and now the knight heads back soon to the E4 square with tempo gain on the black queen. I suppose you could say this is poetry in motion or something. Queen C1. So now black succeeded in his plan. He's put most of his pawns, remaining pawns, they're all on dark squares. So now bishop E6 cunningly opens up a road for the queen to go from c2 to h7 later for the final tactical disaster when black cracks under the pressure. So queen c2, king g2, as though white hasn't got anything evenly planned here, just waiting for a weakness of the last move, and it happens pretty soon. He doesn't have to wait long. After king f8, there's a tactic now available to white after this weakness of the last move. So knight takes g5, and it seems to be crushing in all variations, rather unfortunately for black. So let's go on to another game, shall we? Who wants to go on to another game? Yeah, I think we're still early, so we'll go on to another game. We've got time for another game. Okay. I was surprised to see and pleased to see I am Malcolm Payne playing Nigel Short. He's 2382, International Master Malcolm Payne, who runs the London Chess Centre and also is responsible, the organiser, for the London Chess Classic, this new FIDE tournament at the end of the year. This has been running fantastically successfully in the last 2 years. Really enjoyed the London Classic, 2-3 years. So Malcolm Payne's the main organiser for that event, and he actually still plays as well, as Bunratty Masters shows. So he was black against Nigel Short, and after c4 Malcolm plays knight f6. So we have an dreaded English opening torture. So g3. And I want to take up the English again. I think I was annoyed losing to a little girl at the last London Classic in the last round. And that was with the English opening. And after that, I haven't since played an over the board with the English opening. But really, she was really good. I'm sure she was trained by IMs and GMs to be that deadly, you know, a deadly assassin girl. Yeah. So I haven't yet annotated that game for YouTube, but it will come one day. But there's a lot of systems in the English opening. And apparently, there's a very good 3-volume series by Marin on the English opening for those that want to buy some books. I don't normally recommend books, but this comes with rave reviews from everyone. This Marin 3-volume thing about the English opening, if you want to play it. So anyway, bishop g2. So the English opening is essentially like the Sicilian in reverse, but the sort of dragon bishop on g2, cutting across that diagonal, and white securing a nice bind on light squares generally, and long-term pressure. After castles, he blocks in his own bishop with knight f3. There's other plans sometimes available, like e3 and knight ge2, but sometimes the knight can just come to f3, more classically. After d6, castles, knight c6, and now not playing d4, because this would be normal kind of King's Indian fianchetto variations. To keep it more like the English opening, this quieter move is played d3. And you might think, what's the point of d3? Well, it opens up the bishop. And also, in opening up the bishop, you know, if black plays e5, there isn't so much central tension. And white can often play fancy maneuvers like this to get control of d5 more. e5 is played, and also another plan available for white without the hassle of central tension is this next move, rook b1, simply with the idea of expanding on the queen side. So it looks like a reverse Sicilian defence with a vengeance. Black tries to slow down white's queenside expansion, and this has all been played before. It looks very, very stereotypical for both sides so far, in fact. Black plays now h6, depriving white of this potentially useful g5 square for either a pin or something else. And usually with this move, the knight will move somewhere, and then maybe f5, or maybe even knight h5, and then f5. White gets on with the queenside expansion, takes, and black now has that active rook. doesn't mean much sometimes. Bishop e6, b5, like moves. Now h3. Now finally the f pawn is ready to run here. Knight d7. Sometimes black wants to make use of the f pawn, f like that. Knight e1. Immediately there's a threat now in the position. Bishop takes b7. How is that parried? The bishop is blunted with c6. And you might think, what is this? Why is Nigel Short playing the English Opening? Doesn't he usually play e4? Has he gone boring in his old age? Doesn't this look like wet lettuce? I don't know if those of you following on YouTube would know the wet lettuce classic video on my channel. Isn't this just wet lettuce? What is White achieving here with all this fancy stuff? Is there going to be some structural damage on the queen side to look forward to? Well, actually there's a square here which might be useful as well. Knight c2 to b4, putting more pressure on that c6. Fancy manoeuvres. Yes, Dimas writes on Twitch. So knight c2, as though knight b4 might be on the cards. Looking forward to putting pressure on these two guys. Now Malcolm plays a committal move, d5, to further try and blunt this bishop. These pawns are getting ready to be exchanged off a little bit, and now Nigel relieves the tension. He does snap off c6, then he snapped off d5, but isn't black still solid here? He's got this solid pawn, surely solid enough, and he's provided a barrier to the bishop on g2. But now the knight also cunningly supports bishop a3, which would help undermine d5. So bishop a3, supported by the knight against the rook, threatens bishop e7 and then taking on d5. So what does black do about this? He supports d5 again here by playing knight f6. So he's got much more support now of this poor d5 pawn, defending against bishop e7. And now more pressure being built up. Rook b7 on the poor knight this time. Rook e8, queen b1, seemingly just marking out territory, you know, putting pressure on the b file. Knight c6, and now curiously actually rook c1, which might be difficult to explain. Is this c file going to be useful with two knights here at the moment? Curious move, because the rook behind the two knights. Why, you might ask? Why? And it's a good question. I'm not sure. Let's just look at how the game panned out. So knight a5. The rook is ready at some point maybe to infiltrate by the c file. For the moment, rook b5. Okay, there is potential frontal pressure on this knight, which is used now. Rook c8. Instead of moving this knight to protect the rook, in fact bishop c5 is used to shield the knight on c3 for the moment. And here Malcolm plays a little combination. I'm not sure of the great value of this combination apart from to simplify, to get pieces off the board. He plays a temporary exchange sack with rook takes c5, so he can delight in playing now d4, which means that actually the bishop is covering b3 for this fork. But remember, he's just sacked the exchange, so all he's going to get is the exchange back. So we have to work out and evaluate what happens after the smoke clears here. So after knight b3, knight b4, we're going to be equal on material again now. But unfortunately, white is left still with pressure after rook takes c1. The bishop's got a nice view on the diagonal. The knights seem to have nice entry points all over the place. So would you say white stands better here? If I let you evaluate this for 20 seconds. Do you prefer white here? Do you think it's a significant enough advantage for you to win in this position? So what do you think of this position so far? Do you prefer white massively or just a little bit? 20 seconds? Comments? Player in the game about equal. Dimmers, definitely what? Better for white? There seems to be a concrete threat of knight c7 actually. Because knight c7 is about to get the light square bishop, isn't it? You can't have this raging light square bishop without a counterpart, can you? White is clearly winning. Polm goes to so far to say, yes. Well, let's see what happens. In fact, this is another classic situation, yeah. This is another classic. Black doesn't like his position, has the feeling of being strategically crushed. And guess what? There's a weakness of the last move, surprise, surprise. Or it seems to be on the surface anyway. This next move seems to be an outright blunder from a difficult position. Queen d7. Can you guess what white plays here? So I gave you a clue. There's a sort of weakness of the last move. What does white play here? 10 seconds. His intention was probably to attack h3 and I don't know. Unfortunately, white has a nice move here. Yeah, bishop c6. It just seems to skewer the queen and rook. Bit unfortunate. So that ended the material equality of the position quite quickly, from white being a little bit better, or significantly better. So the exchange up now. You know, is there a vacuum here to speak of? h4. He refuses to move his king to protect h3. Knight f6. Knight c6 attacking the queen. The queen moves to f8. Unfortunately losing a centre pawn as well. Knight takes e5 now. Knight d5 hitting that knight. No problem, knight can go to f3, putting pressure now on d4. So black's crumbled, it seems, quite quickly. Malcolm tries knight c3. White just takes on that c3 knight and plays d4, blunting the bishop. So it seems wet lettuce in the right hands is really dangerous lettuce. It's like killer lettuce in the right hands. The wet lettuce of the English opening. If you get this sort of position. Bishop f5. e4. Doesn't mind bishop g4 because now rook takes c3 and he's protecting f3. And if black wants to win d4, he has to take on f3 now, which he does, but it doesn't mean much here. Queen b3 tying black down to f7, and the queen's got a nice central square now. Queen d5, and here the exchange up. Killer wet lettuce is demonstrated that from such epoxy opening, which does nothing apart from gain positional advantage, you can still win. So that's the beauty of chess. If we want to look at this game again, black resigns here. So let's have a look at this opening again. So none of this e4 stuff, just c4, nice and positional, and just simple stuff. This is stereotypical play that many English opening players would be playing as a kind of routine, a stored subroutine, that you just play rook b1 and you gain space on the queen side, but there were quite clever nuances to it, the way it was played here. First there was the h3 move, which you might not think is that necessary. Doesn't it expose a target to a battery one day? That target wasn't used here. Knight e1, okay. b7 under fire. Knight c2, as though the b4 square is crucial for exerting more pressure on c6. Tristessa writes, maybe Nigel didn't want to risk much against Bunny. Maybe, yeah. He didn't risk any opening theory, did he? Or preparation. Yeah. Maybe Malcolm been working throughout the night with chess base on theoretical, you know, stuff. with e4, and just to get this wet lettuce in the afternoon instead. Disappointment. So d5, it looks as though, yeah, black's equalizing, surely he's blunting the bishop, but no, unfortunately there's a nagging edge emerging here to do with e7 and protecting d5, and the English opening is all about d5 anyway, so you'd expect some sort of pressure increase to be possible based on this Fianchetto bishop eyeing d5, and it's all targeting d5. So knight f6, rook b7, starting to get difficult. This is a really uncomfortable move to see, this knight c6 actually. But what else was there? I mean, it's starting to get quite difficult. Knight c6, rook c1. Okay, this rook c1 I think is pretty nifty stuff. Just making sure that the counterplay and stuff, it will be useful on the c file. Keeping all his pieces, you know, optimally placed, eyeing, like x-raying black's position. So everything's optimally placed. So rook c1's the final little touch. Knight a5, and he doesn't mind. There's a tactical issue which has emerged of rook c8. Okay, so rook c8. So Nigel's bishop c5 actually was threatening bishop b6. If you think about it, yeah, that knight is not totally brilliant on a5, unless this simplifying operation was of great strategic value to black, but it's more value to white, it seems, this rook takes c5. Because this bishop's been extended by d4. Look at these light squares, they've all been extended a little bit. Knight b5, so black gets back the exchange, but look at the infiltration now of this position. It's all in white's favour, isn't it? Black never got his sort of own independent plan working on the king side or anywhere, and he immediately just gives up the exchange. I can't see this has been an exchange sacrifice, a positional exchange sacrifice, or if it was, it doesn't look that convincing to lose the exchange like that. But it's a difficult position. Weaknesses of the last move creep in because we're all human, so I think it was just the loss of the exchange, and after that black doesn't last too long. He loses his centre pawns, he's the exchange down for nothing, and then that's it. So that was a different style of game to the other game of Nigel. Do you guys, should we have a look at another game, or should we leave it till next week? Who wants to look at another game on anywhere, Chessbase? Another game or next week? I'm just going to pose that question. Okay, okay, I can be persuaded to do one more if you'd like. Remember, I lost last night. I'm feeling like a total bunny myself. I really, you know, I hate chess a lot of the time. Actually, I didn't really want to do the broadcast tonight because I blundered horribly last night. But I'm receiving some empathy for these blunders in these games. It actually quite makes me emotional that if you have a difficult position, it's only human to blunder. I'm about to break down on webcam. Seeing blunders in difficult positions is making me feel a bit better, actually. I don't know about you guys. If you have difficult positions in over the board, it's natural to blunder. Okay, so oh no. Okay. So Adams, oh, I can't believe this. I cannot believe this. Adams is an E4 player. Unless we have the wrong Michael Adams assigned here. I thought he was an E4 player. So I don't understand this game. at all. He plays d4. He's playing d4 as well. Maybe it's the chess base age we live in, that people want to play a greater diversity of stuff. So why is Michael Adams playing d4? You know, to avoid preparation, most likely, and use his natural talents in the middle game and end game, and not necessarily his amount of opening preparation. Does anyone think otherwise? Because this is so unusual to see him playing. I never thought I'd see it, the Queen's Gambit. So knight f3, he's playing a Catalan, g3. Okay, so bishop e7, bishop g2. Both sides castle. By the way, is Chess Explained still with us? If so, are you surprised? Anyone surprised that Adam's playing this Catalan? Okay, so d takes c4. Queen c2, temporary pawn sacrifice. Black doesn't try too hard, of course, to protect the pawn on c4. He lets it go. So a6, he's going to accelerate his own fianchetto maybe once the pawn is taken. Try and challenge this bishop on the diagonal. For the moment, white doesn't want to take c4, he just plays a4. So Adams is playing this superpositionally. Okay, so knight bd7. Still no rush to take on c4. Rook d1. If black wants to go bend over backwards to play knight b6, well, there's always a5 and other stuff. c4 is going to drop. So c5. Knight bd2. Take the pawn with the knight, maybe. Black gives up the pawn. He's fed up with his pawn about to drop. He just plays c3. There's going to be huge damage if black tries to hold on to the pawn. Trust me, huge damage. We just can't see it immediately, but it's going to be. This is typical Catalan pressure. So black gives up the pawn with c3. B takes c3 and plays queen c7. Knight c4 introduces bishop f4 on the cards now to harass the queen. Black plays c takes d4, and after c takes d4, knight b6, using that pin temporarily on the queen. Knight fe5, being able to recharge the knight on c4, and still with bishop f4 on the cards. This is a problem bishop for the moment. This bishop's nice. Black plays bishop d7 though. So is black unravelling here? Bishop f4, it looks very comfortable for white, wouldn't you say? If I ask you to evaluate this openings position at move 15, this is another wet lettuce with seemingly a big advantage, not using any major opening theory. I don't want to bias what you think, but what do you think of this position? Do you think it's better for white? If I give you 10 seconds, if you want to comment, better for white? Just a yes or no. Yeah? You think so? Okay, Ryan thinks so. Caligula. Not sure. Okay. Kite Bert, just play yes. Olsock agree. Okay. So I think most people agree it's better for white. So what does black do? Tries to blunt the bishop, knight bd5 maybe, and attack this bishop on f4. Tactical move now, which, oh dear, was there a weakness already of the last move already with knight bd5? Because this next move looks quite vicious. In fact, I'm wondering, it sort of wins a piece, doesn't it, this next move? Can you guess it if I give it 10 seconds? Doesn't it temporarily win a piece, this next move? Can anyone guess? Okay, knight g6, yes. Hitting the queen and also e7. But actually this knight's protecting e7 for the moment, but also the exchange is at stake. So knight takes f4 was played, allowing knight takes e7 check, and white is temporarily a piece up here, but this knight is stranded. So is black being totally ingenious here, temporarily allowing himself to be a piece down? Rook a e8, well, it is white's move now, and Bronstein writes quite often that the person with the move is a person to be feared. So what does Adams do here with an extra piece? Okay, his knight's about to be swallowed up. He opens up the centre, he plays d5, and in fact that indirectly defends the rook because of d6, of course. By the way, black, to be fair, is 2282. I'm showing you mismatches of rating, I hope you don't mind. These games are often more entertaining than looking at 2700s play each other. So black's only 2282 and Adams is 2724. So on rating, black shouldn't have a chance anyway. But it seems to be a clever idea to be a piece down temporarily, or is it? Well, black plays now b5. Now d6, offering the knight on c4, which is taken. Unfortunately, the smoke clears here with rook d4. And okay, so this knight is protected, bishop's good, got horrible stuff going on here. Rook b8, and he collects that pawn. So black is now material down clearly. Rook b6, and now an invasive move similar to the Nigel Short game we just saw, an invasive bishop c6. Rook d8, taking on d7. Now knight c6, hitting that rook. Rook ac1, preparing the huge knight e7 and rook c1, rook c8. Okay, black played f5, which doesn't really help the cause after knight e5. Black resigned, he crumbled. So it was another quiet opening, just used to crush the bunny, really. The bunny in this case being, funny enough, called Short, but Philip Michael Short, 2282, not Nigel Short. Okay, Philip Michael Short. Okay, so he resigned here. It's a hope. It looks like a hopeless position. This g2 is actually useful for white to avoid any back row issue. You know, this is looking bad for black. This sort of continuation. So what could black do here? It's resignable. You know, his rook. You know, it's hopeless. So we'll have a quick look at this Catalan. So in the right hands, even the Catalan is a really dangerous opening, it seems, and you can win with it in 30 moves if you're lucky. So what happens again? A temporary pawn sack. White in no rush to get back his pawn. It's given to him back. Then the queen is harassed pretty soon, leading to knight g6, which leads to being a piece up. And black gets his piece back at the cost of horrible position, losing an important pawn. This bishop c6 simplifies, leaving white with a clearly won position. Knight e5 was the final move. Okay, we could carry on next week actually. So anyway, I hope you got something from these games this week, and see you next week. Yeah. So yeah, I hope you got something from it. Thanks very much. I think I'm going to stop the stream now, and we'll see. Have a good week, and see you next Tuesday. Okay. Thanks very much.